who's to say that we need these difficult things to shape us into the people that we are?
Suicide is the only ADGO you cannot learn from. Everything else is just an ADGO that you can spin to the good.
What exactly is the meditation uncovering that makes it so useful?
Because we believe our thoughts, and our thoughts, you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that can step back and notice those thoughts.
Welcome to the show. Thank you for taking part in this immersive listening experience. A meaningful existence is a moving target that, no matter how close, will always be out of reach. We hope this message finds you with an outstretched hand. As we attempt to uncover complex truths, remember, life's toughest questions can be answered if we all just focus on one thing: being good people.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Good People, episode 38. Today, I was joined by Linda Hancock. She is a retired family nurse practitioner, and she has a PhD in education. She currently helps educate young people in what she calls the S's of health: sex, substances, stress, social norms, and spirituality. In today's episode, we talked about her 30-year career at Virginia Commonwealth University, why she thinks education on mental and physical health is such an important conversation to have, and some of the issues young people face specifically with substance use. This episode is brought to you by Die Tired. Jonathan from Die Tired Co. was kind enough to send us over some service caps, which I've worn many times on the show. I am also wearing their crew neck sweatshirt. It's one of my favorite crew necks that I own now, but check out what they have at dietiredco.com. And if you like what you see, use code GP15 at checkout. Right now, that is the best way to support us at GP. And also Jonathan at Die Tired. He's a really cool and rad fella. If you guys are watching on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our weekly uploads. Any interaction with the show really, truly does help us out a ton, and we thank you in advance. Enjoy the show. Well, Linda, welcome to the show. Thanks for doing this. Before we get started, can you give the audience a brief overview of you and your career?
Okay, I'm an old retired lady, so I worked at Virginia Commonwealth University for over 30 years with college students, and I am by trade and training a Family Nurse Practitioner, actually a Family Nurse Practitioner. So I worked in the clinic with, I always used to say I do all the S's. Sex, substance use, smoking, silliness, stress. Those are my S's.
Good deal. What is it about education on those things that you find so fascinating?
I guess I should tell the audience I did get a PhD in education just because I'm so curious about the impact of education on behavior. And what I'd say is education is a necessary but insufficient thing to change behavior.
Why is that?
Because you know what's good for you, but you don't always do it, right? People are ambivalent about a lot of things. So it's the human condition to be ambivalent. You should floss your teeth. You should put that condom on. But, it's a tough thing to do in the moment. So I think I love my career. I find people very interesting.
Okay. Yeah. So it's like the hard right is harder, obviously, than the easy wrong.
I don't know. I don't like to use the words right and wrong. I talk about good and not so good. Like, what are the good things about having sex without a condom? What are the not so good things? What are the good things about getting drunk? What are the not so good things?
That's interesting. I'm a fitness coach, and so I often say with movement, there's no right or wrong. There's just efficient or inefficient ways to do it. And so, like, if the standard of a deadlift, for example, is to pick the weight up off the ground until you stand up, like, you can do that thousands of ways, but there's a really effective way to do it that is safe and you won't get hurt. And there's really ineffective ways and inefficient ways to do it.
So that kind of translates to all of life. I believe you either live skillfully or not so skillfully, and that it's really just finding the skills that help your mental, physical, and spiritual well-being.
What is the why behind some of these things? You talked about interest in education, all of the things that you look at, you find people fascinating, but what is the why behind your desire to help others with these S's that you focus on?
Oh, here's the long and the short of it. Here's my down and dirty story. By the way, do you know what an ADGO is?
An ADGO?
ADGO. It stands for stands for another darn growth opportunity.
Okay.
It's really from the rooms, the 12-step rooms. It's really an AFGO, another F in growth opportunity. But, what have you learned the most from in your life, the good times or the hard times?
Okay.
It's pretty much always the hard times, right?
Yeah.
So I was going to be a hospice nurse when I was in high school because I was so shy. I was my high school's valedictorian, but I didn't go to med school because I didn't think I could make life and death decisions. And I didn't think I could talk to people about sex. I was so shy. I was like this goody two-shoes Catholic girl. Kissed one guy in high school. He joined the priesthood. I'm like, screw that. I'm going to join the convent, right? So my dad was a bartender and you had to get a scholarship. So I joined the Army to see the world and they paid for my nursing degree. And anyway, long story short, I went out one night when I was a young lieutenant, had too much to drink. Friend offered to take me home, didn't take me home, took me back to his place. Didn't rape me, but he pushed me way further than I wanted to go. And I was pregnant with external contact. And I was devastated. I didn't even know you could get pregnant with external contact. So I was suicidal. My plan was to drive off a bridge. But I found one person who was willing to listen. And that changed everything. One person who didn't judge, who treated me with kindness and respect. Went through the whole pregnancy by myself, placed my only little girl for adoption, and then met a wonderful man. And I have 3 wonderful sons right now. And it changed my whole life. That was my ADGO. So I've worked with college students for 30 years, never judging. Who am I to judge, right? Helping them with alcohol and sex, realizing that education is essential. Like if I had known what I could have got pregnant with external contact, I wouldn't have done it. That's the kind of person I was, a rule follower, but I didn't know. And so, yes, you need education, but then people are ambivalent. And so there you go. That's how I got interested in it. And so instead of being a hospice nurse, I ended up in college health and I talked to thousands of people at a time about sex and substances. And it's been a wonderful life.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you very much for sharing that. That is an interesting dynamic, I feel like, of life that I'm starting to uncover, is that you don't, these difficult, often horrible things that happen to us are often the things that shape us into the people that we are. I talked to a lady, her name's Dr. Tracy Valencourt, a couple months ago on the show, and she researches bullying and like social dynamics. And her why was she was in the popular crowd, and a lot of the research was she was going through school on bullying was not in line with what she remembered bullying to be, like the popular kids and stuff like that that would make fun of others and tease and all of those things. And something that she mentioned was that like bullying is that we need to stop bullying, obviously, which I think most people would agree with. And that was her whole point. And you saying that just made me think of it like, who's to say that we need these difficult things to shape us into the people that we are? And I don't really know if I'm drawing to a point here, but I don't know what the answer to that is, because similarly, like the hardest things that I've been through have largely shaped the things that I'm passionate with helping people with now, which was I was always overweight and I wasn't comfortable with that. And I found out how to get in shape. And now I really enjoy helping other people do the same. And it sounds like you have a very similar story with that anyways, but I just wanted to thank you for sharing that. And so I don't know if that was really a point or a question, but that was just what was on my mind when you said that.
Well, I think it's the heart of it. I mean, I think if I had to pick how I work with people, it's curiosity and kindness. And if people don't know about ADGOs, and young adults, everything is so intense that when they hit their first big stumbling block, they, fail out of college, they have a legal charge, they catch herpes, they think it's the end of the world. Suicide is the only ADGO you cannot learn from. Everything else is just an ADGO that you can spin to the good. And I think that's why, so I'm really a recovery ally, which means for me, I'm not a person in recovery, but I'm a person who gets to work every day to beat the stigma of substance use disorder, and I get to hang out with really wise people in recovery who've had many ADGOs and have turned that to the good.
Yeah. What do you feel like is one of the most challenging things that young people deal with in this world of health?
I think it's, to be quite honest with you, I think it's the mental health stuff. I mean, I don't know how much our culture, we live in one of the most unhealthy cultures on the planet. Do you know Dan Siegel? Have you ever read any of Dan Siegel's stuff?
I'm not familiar with him.
I'll Google him, Dr. Dan Siegel. He's the man who taught us the hand model of the brain?
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, that's Dan Siegel's work. He's a psychiatrist from Harvard who works with kids and who has started this whole field of interpersonal neurobiology. And what Dan says is we were meant to be connected. Like we've been sold this bill of goods. We've been lied to. We've been told we are individual selves, but we are not. The energy that we have in our bodies transcends, we're connected to other people. So we've created this individualistic culture where young people are not connected to people. And it's devastating to their mental health because humans were meant to be herd animals. And then you throw in social, like technology, and people are not with each other. That's not how the brain is supposed to work, or the mind. So the thing we need to do, and it's really hard, is to teach 5-year-olds how to live skillfully with their mind, body, and relationship. And that requires meditation practices. And people think the trouble is we have the blind leading the blind, like your college faculty don't meditate. And so they don't know how to teach their students how to meditate. But it's the mental wellness thing. Watch some Dan Siegel stuff. He's my new research crush. Do you have research crushes? I always have a research crush. He's my new one.
I don't have research crushes, but I might, because just like with the nature of the show, I really enjoy talking to researchers, and I've been doing more researching and it's interesting. I'm getting to the point now with my guests to where like I'll read a paper on something that I like and think is cool, and I'll reach out to somebody. And then like a couple weeks will go by and I'll be reading another paper on something else, and it'll mention their name as like one of the supplemental authors. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm getting well connected now in this, in this world, which is cool. But something you brought up there that I thought of was, again, to bring back something that I learned from the show. She was actually a professor of mine. I studied at JMU, Dr. Lindsay Harville Bowman. We were talking and we did an episode on this. I'm blanking on the name of the theory, but it is a theory on death anxiety and essentially terror management theory. And the three components of terror management theory when it comes to living a good life and essentially accepting your death is you need to know what it is that you value. You need to feel as though you're living up to those values. And then the third component is you need to have people to share it with. The close relationships are super important. And that is something that I think doing this show has taught me more than anything. Is I feel as though culturally the individualization of the world that we live in is a tragedy. It's a huge mistake. It is a tragedy. That we have to deal with it every single day. And the comparison I often think of is a lot of other cultures that have a huge emphasis on family that we don't have in America. It's like when you're born into a family somewhere else, for the most part, it's kind of said that you're in this system forever. Like you have to be a part of this system. And it doesn't feel like that. Not to say that, American kids turn 18 and their parents will kick them out. That definitely does happen. And I'm very fortunate that I'm very close with my family still. But I think people don't realize that they would feel a lot better about themselves and their mental health if at some level they understood that the self themselves, a piece of that is also the world around them and the relationships that they have. Like you definitely need to take care of yourself and make yourself a priority. But at what end, right? There is a level, I think, that it's important to recognize that there are other people in your life that are counting on you to be a certain type of way or have a relationship with. And contributing to that and working at it has a lot to do with your own mental well-being in and of itself.
So I've had the honor and privilege at VCU of being part of a team that founded Rams in Recovery, which is a collegiate recovery program. And there's literally hundreds of young people going through the program at VCU and 12 other colleges. And the gift, their ADCO that I see is, yes, substance use destroyed their lives to a certain extent. But to recover, it's mutual support groups. People have to be with each other. They serve each other. They practice gratitude and kindness to each other. And that's the way we're supposed to live. Like, I kind of wish everybody had to be in recovery.
Yeah. At least having like a community of people to talk to. Like, I see that at the gym all the time. The model for the fitness that we use, and CrossFit specifically uses, is a group. It's, you come in with, 5 to 20 other people, and here's the warm up, here's the workout. We all suffered together, and then you're laying on the floor and you're like, wow, that was horrible. But then you high five and you say, all right, I'll see you tomorrow, man. Like, and there's a bit of accountability in that way, and sharing this hard thing together. Number one, makes you more consistent because you have accountability in that way, but it makes it fun and it makes it something that's worth showing up for.
Yes, there you go. You're onto it. And it's not optional. Like, we have to have each other, and we also need to have time alone in our own minds to understand how they work. So I do meditate on death regularly. That's a Buddhist thing. They meditate on death every day because we have to be sort of non-attached to things to be able to focus on where we are now. But anyway, I think what you said about the groups, the thing that recovering people have is they go below the surface, and they do work on their meditation as well. Like, one of the most popular groups at VCU is Dharma or Refuge Recovery, where they practice meditation together.
Are there any other, you say meditation, but I'm curious if I think the more understood term would just be like mindfulness. Talk to me a bit about that. Is there any other alternative practices that do the same job? What exactly is the meditation uncovering that makes it so useful?
So if you read Dan Siegel's book, it's called Aware, the Science and Practice of Presence. So I actually like the term stillness practice better than meditation or mindfulness, because there are many, think of it as a big circle, and there are many stillness practices, running by yourself in the woods, mountain biking, doing artwork, sitting and listening to the birds. These are all stillness practices that allow our brains to settle. A subset of that in that circle would be silent meditation. And Dan Siegel has something called the Wheel of Awareness, where you learn how to just notice your senses. He calls it the 8 senses. We have the 5 senses you notice. The 6th sense is our gut, because we think that our brain is in charge, but really we have a brain around our heart and a brain in our gut. So we notice those things, and then we notice in the 7th sense how our mind works, and then we sit in pure awareness. And it changes the way the brain works. Like, this is not hocus pocus. Dan Siegel's kind of a savant. In his interpersonal neurobiology, he draws in people from everything from anthropology to physics to math. All these fields come together and look at the reality of how mind, nobody's defined mind, works, but mind is bigger than your encapsulated brain. So I guess that's a long ways to saying, start somewhere. I was like someone who didn't sit still well. I had to start with Tai Chi, moving meditation. Even if it's just a few minutes, something you do where you sit in stillness, it gets you out of the me network. I always say everybody needs to be in recovery. I just need to be in recovery from being an asshole. Like, all of us need to be in recovery from something, right? And in the middle of our brains, we have this thing called the default mode network, which is the me network. It's me, me, me. Like when something bad happens, you're like, well, next time I'm going to say this to them about that and everything, like these stories that we tell in our head. That's the craving mind. That's the addicted mind. And to make your brain healthy, Dan would say you need to differentiate and link all parts of your brain and body. Like, because we believe our thoughts, and our thoughts, you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that can step back and notice those thoughts.
Yeah.
So that's a skill that people look at askance, but pretty soon it's going to be like brushing your teeth. Everybody will do a still. Everybody, now we exercise, right? Because we found out the benefits of exercise. This will be non-negotiable. Everybody will do a stillness practice.
That's interesting because I mentioned this on a recent episode with somebody, and that thought, what you just had of like you have like the me part of your brain. We were actually discussing I heard somebody arguing the differences between having one sexual or romantic partner or multiple, and the people who were arguing for obviously having one partner is kind of what you're saying, where they said, are you really going to resort to your like basic level, first level instinct to dictate how you operate in this world? And I feel like along with that individualization, that's like a very basic, bare bones level instinct that we all have, which is the me brain. Like I need sustenance and water and sex or a relationship, whatever, for myself. But we live in a world where we don't have to just solely operate based off of those things. And it's important to step in from an outside perspective and find stillness or presence because that's really the time where you can actually think about the things that you want from an objective sense, and now how do I move forward and operate in the world towards this thing? So for example, like maintaining one romantic relationship for some might be very difficult, but it is worthwhile. It's a very worthwhile pursuit. Similarly, I might want to eat this food or not exercise today because it's easier and it's preserving me right now, but it would be more beneficial for me to do those things.
Yes. So look, that brings us back to what I said about ambivalence. So Joel, do you use motivational interviewing with the people that you work with? Do you know that term?
I've read the book on motivational interviewing. I guess loosely, yes.
Okay. Yeah, because everybody's ambivalent and people, make decisions all the time. The thing that stillness practices add to it is it gives you a space so that you don't impulsively make that decision. And do you know what the gateway drug to addiction is? Well, what the gateway to addiction? What is? I always ask people, well, what did you were taught in high school? What's the gateway to severe addiction?
I don't even remember.
So usually people yell out marijuana, nicotine, alcohol, maybe those things. But the real gateway to severe addiction is trauma. So if people are self-medicating pain, and it doesn't mean that they necessarily need to be using substances, you could self-medicate your pain by having multiple sex partners, by using porn, by shoplifting. There are many ways to self-medicate pain. I don't know if you know Gabor Mate. He's another research crush of mine. He always says, don't ask why the addiction, ask why the pain. Mm-hmm. And all of this work actually was done with obese people. So I don't know if you know, what do you know about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences?
Not much.
So if you could, I could send you a couple links. So the story is the most important public health study ever done that nobody knows about. But Dr. Folletti ran an obesity program out in California, and he did prevention programs for a lot of things. All of his programs were very successful, except for the obesity program. People would lose 40 pounds, gain 50. Constantly they would relapse, right? And he's like, I don't know what's going on here. I'm going to put on my researcher ears and just ask all these people the same questions. So he would ask them, how much did you weigh when you were born? How much did you weigh when you graduated high school? He asked them about their social life. How old were you the first time you had sex? So he had this routine he did, and he was on a roll one day, and he asked this woman, he got confused. He said, how much did you weigh the first time you had sex? And she said, 40 pounds. And he said, what? How much did you weigh? And she said, 40 pounds, Dr. Folletti. My dad raped me when I was 5. And what he found was he studied 10 adverse childhood events: abuse, neglect, parent in jail, parent with like beating the wife. So there's 10 adverse childhood events. The more you have, the more it directly correlates with your health and well-being. Everything: cancer rates, high blood pressure rates, addiction rates. The more adverse childhood events you have, the more unhealthy your body is. And so the people that were obese, once they, lost the weight, people would get, sexually attracted to them. It would terrify them, and they would go back to their old behaviors. So really, if you see any disorder where people are compulsively doing stuff to self-medicate, there's probably something deeper going on. And a conversation about ambivalence and why it might be going on in a non-judgmental, curious, and kind way, going back to maybe their childhood and the pain of their childhood, would be really important.
I've talked to people about attachment theory on the show before, and something that's pretty common in that world is it doesn't really matter the amount of things that happen to you. It's how you process it, how you'll work through it, that you have a secure attachment to rely on when bad things happen to you. Is that sort of in the same line of thinking? Almost like my question really comes down to the more adverse child. What's the E?
Experiences, adverse childhood experiences.
Can you essentially work through those things enough to where, now we're in a place where it's not hopefully affecting the health outcome? Or is it kind of one of those things where the things that happen to you and it will result, the way it will result is always going to be correlated to that?
I believe that everything changes. So yes, you can work through them. And in fact, in California, I don't know if you've heard of the Deepest Well. Nadine Harris is their Surgeon General for California. Every kid that's brought to a pediatric clinic is screened for the 10 ACEs. And if they are identified as being high risk, they get them into resiliency skills training at the age of 5 or 9. The sooner you get the skills and the support to become resilient, that connectedness that we all need, the better your life and health are going to be. It is never too late to change things. One of the things I do in my retirement is I go into a place called CCAP, which is the Community Corrections Alternative Program. Our culture has thrown tons of people in jail, and almost everybody in jail has a high ACEs score. If you ever want to see something that will break your heart, it's called the Compassion Prison Project. They take all these really intense criminals, like guys that are in jail at Folsom, and they put them in a big circle and they say, take a step into the circle if you were abused as a child. Take a step in if you experienced hunger as a child. Take a step in, and the entire circle collapses. So we take traumatized people and we throw them in jail instead of trying to help them develop their resiliency skills. And so I go in with a group of women who are my connected support system. And it's just women talking to women in CCAP about resiliency skills and stillness practices and seeing their worth and wanting them back in our communities. So I'd encourage all your listeners to get smarter about our criminal justice system. We have literally traumatized people, and we incarcerate 3 times as many people as the rest of the world combined. It's crazy.
What do we do about that? It seems this is a huge systemic, impossible challenge that needs to be overcome, that is down to how we are being educated. You can't help the things that happen to you when you're young. Me and many other people have gone through horrible things in their youth that it's like, I laugh, but it's because what else is there to do, when you start talking about some of the traumas and stuff like that you've experienced. And so, you're doing great work in going places and helping educate people about some of these things. But I'm curious if there's any specific thing that you've given thought to as far as how to make this change. maybe simpler and more broad scale?
Well, Joel, I think what you're doing is part of the piece of the pie that needs to be done. I mean, there we go back to the beginning where I said education is a necessary but insufficient thing. But if you don't know about the criminal justice problem in America, I really wasn't focused on it until I worked with Tom Bannard, who directs my collegiate recovery program. He got a felony when he's very open about all this when he was a senior at UVA. And the criminal justice system, his eyes were open to that. It really is the slavery of our generation. There are like 6 times as many people, Black and brown people in prisons as there are white people. Like there's so many injustices in the system. We take abused and traumatized people and give them no therapy. But things are changing. Like the CCAP program does exist. There are like 4 places around the state for men. There's only 1 facility for women. And then you do this podcast and people hear something and then they learn that, yes, it is a problem and we need not to throw felons in jail. Felons, if they paid their time, they call them barrier crimes. Like they can't get an apartment, they can't get a job. Like that's wrong. People are people. We all have our adgos.
I spoke with a gentleman a couple of weeks ago he owns a gym and he has this nonprofit with a couple of other guys where they go in, they're based out of Memphis, I think, but they go into jails and he works out with them and teaches them how to, like get fit. But there's other pieces to it as well, all in hopes to essentially give them something to take to businesses when they get out, that they've gone through this program and have rehabilitated themselves and have learned specific trades that they can now apply, which is, it's very interesting. I for one, am still very ignorant to a lot of the things that you are talking about as well. But I do know the injustices of the criminal justice system are largely, like a lot of issues I think we're facing, more on the mental, worked through trauma side of things, that there are lots of variables, but there's these sort of like fundamental principles that if we address and fix, hopefully we'll see a pretty big scale improvement across the board in regards to a lot of things. Something I'm particularly interested in is substance use. And my overarching question here is, how big of a problem is substance use? But just to pull up some data that I've found, according to the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, almost 53% of full-time college students, which are aged 18 to 22, drank alcohol in the past month. 33% of those engaged in binge drinking, and about 9% of those meet the criteria for actual alcohol addiction. And just supplementally, being a recent college student, I know anecdotally that Adderall and marijuana and other drugs are also commonly used within that age range. So my question is, how big of a problem is it?
So I'm actually a social norms researcher for myself. So I look at all the data, and what you focus on expands. The truth is, actually, the way I think about the data is 1 in 5 college students doesn't drink at all. 2 in 5 has 013, 014 when they go out. 2 in 5 tie it on quite regularly, and this one does it all the time. And of this one, when he graduates, he or she graduates, half of them will moderate back their drinking, and that 9% gets addicted, like you said. So yes, is it a problem? 60%, mostly not. 40%, this guy uses in ways that could hurt himself or others, and this one too. So you got to be careful what you focus on, because what you focus on expands. So at VCU, like I used to that's what I do. Like at my website, Linda at lindagivesback.com, I think everybody has a superpower. My superpower is I can talk to young adults about alcohol, sex, and drugs, and they care to listen. But I always take clickers or cell phone polling, and I'll ask them, what do you think people do? What do you really do? And because it's anonymous, they tell me the truth. And so I'll ask them everything from how many sex partners did you have to how much did you drink? And the truth is the majority of people are healthier than you think. Most people have other things that are important to them, so they will moderate back. These 40% may be using in ways that can get themselves addicted or lead to ADGOs, criminal justice problems, right? And so Yes, all those statistics you shared are true. There are people with problems. Most people don't have them. It's kind of like smoking. My dissertation research was this mass media campaign. It was like optical illusions. Like 7 out of 10 college students at that time didn't smoke. It's way higher now. Most people don't smoke. Some people vape. But people doing a thing sticks out in your memory. It's what you notice. You see people that are drunk. You notice people holding the vape. And so you think everybody's doing it. Joel, are you so young? How old were you when 9/11 happened?
I was 1 year old.
Oh, Lord.
I was born in 2000.
Holy crap, I'm so old. After 9/11, it seemed like everybody was putting American magnets, flag magnets on their car. It looked like everybody had a flag magnet. But I made myself count for an entire week as I drove to work. It was never over 40%. But you think everybody did it. And that's kind of the way it is. You know who believed my social media campaigns that most people don't smoke? Smokers. They're like, yeah, every time I try to get a cigarette or a light, no one's got one. So, like, yes, there are problems and we need to focus on that. But I also like to tell healthy people you're healthy. Like, do what's in your heart. Because not everybody gets drunk. Not everybody has a million sex partners. Guess the number, the most common. How many sex partners have you had in the last year? 0 to 1, 2 to 3, 4 to 5, 10 or more. Guess what the most common response is?
I would guess 2.
Yeah, everybody says 2 to 3. It's actually 0 to 1. It's always like 60, 70% 0 to 1 because really, think about it. What do people really want in their lives? They want relationships, to feel safe, to not worry about diseases. And so we think everybody's having a boatload of partners, but who's getting more sex? The person with 1 sex partner or the person with 5? Mm-hmm. 1, they're getting better sex and they're getting better quality because they're practicing. Like people like certain things. So everything is like this ambivalence. So if you tell people the truth, most people will never use an opiate. Most people will not steal Adderall from their roommates. Most people do not do those things. Then it frees them up more to be who they really are in their hearts anyway. I mean, the trouble is we all want to be normal because we're herd animals. So if we think everybody's doing it, then we need to do it because we'd all rather be normal than healthy.
Yeah. And I would just echo that. I've read that statistic on that somewhere, like 95% of all sex is within a monogamous relationship, which is very interesting. But yeah, I think you're right in that, somebody who has a glass of wine every couple of weeks with their steak dinner, it's like there's nothing to talk about there. So there's no point in really even engaging in that conversation. So I suppose it's more how young people are engaged in doing this. I would say, though, isn't that 40% that we're looking at sort of high, though? Like,
sure. And that's where a lot of the harm comes from. And that's where a lot of the ad goes come from. So we definitely want to deal with them. I'll tell you one reason I retired. I cannot teach another generation of 18-year-olds how to drink. It just frosts my Fruit Loops that we do not teach people about this molecule that kills and hurts so many people. Did you know all the smart alcohol goes to England and Australia, and then they have to make it stupid to sell in America? If you picked up a Jack Daniels or a Coors Light in England, it would tell you servings per container. So you could make an intelligent decision. Like if you picked up a Bud Light and it said 1.5 servings per container, as a woman, I would know 2 is 3 drinks and I could cut myself off. But in America, we take all that information off. So people pick up a Four Loko, for God's sakes. Have you seen Four Loko Sour on the market? It's 14% alcohol. You pop the top on that 23-ounce can, you just had a 6-pack for $2.50. A handle of alcohol. Do you know how much alcohol is an 80-proof handle of alcohol? The big, that's like 40 drinks. Mm-hmm. I had this kid. He was awesome. I love this kid. Very smart. Got depressed. He was drinking a half a handle a day when his girlfriend broke up with him. He was puking coffee grounds and having the shakes. And I said, do you know that you are drinking 20 drinks a day? He's like, Linda, I'm spending $6 on that a day. How could that be 20? It is. We don't label products. Here's another one of my fantasies. I have all these fantasies. I wish every liquor bottle in America was like Pepto-Bismol or NyQuil. It would have a unit dose measuring cup. So if you picked up Fireball, it'd have a bigger unit dose measuring cup. But if you picked up 151 rum, it'd have an itty bitty little one. Because drunk people shouldn't have to do math. They shouldn't have to think hard. Just makes me nuts. It makes me nuts.
It seems like it's similar, more conversation, like more education on that is what is necessary to improve it.
And it's not just education. Like, we changed the fatality rates on the highways by putting airbags in the car and safety brakes and backup cameras. So when you look at public health, the hardest thing to change is the individual. The easiest thing to change is like the stuff around the individual. So really, we should re-engineer every alcohol container. It should be clear that, do you know there's Mountain Dew alcohol now?
No.
I mean, what parent is going to know that their kid it should not be like that. And Four Loko looks like an energy drink. It's evil. And we have all these laws buried in the firearms, tobacco, whatever. It's just crazy. Nobody cares about the well-being of young people. Like, we just blame them for getting drunk, but we sell them a product that's not packaged in a way that they could use it intelligently. So that was my soapbox. I'm sorry.
Well, I think that the conversation around that is a very interesting and worthwhile thing to have, where something that I contemplate on a lot, and this is, again, somebody who is 23 years old, so I'm still sort of in this population of people, but young people have a hard time understanding the fact that they're going to spend the majority of their life as adults. And so, for example, I think back a lot on my life, and when I was young, when people would say things to me, whatever it was, like teaching me a lesson, you understand the words that are coming out of their mouth, but because of your experience or whatever it is, you can't really internalize what they're saying. And so I think that there's a bit of a disconnect with that too. I'm somebody who, like, the DARE program in school, it worked on me. I've never really,
you're a rule follower.
I smoked a cigar a year with my dad and brother at the beach. And, I haven't really touched any other smoking substances, vapes, and all that has never really been appealing to me. I haven't had any alcohol at all this year. That was like my yearly goal. But next year when I reintroduce it, I'll have a couple glasses of wine every couple of weeks probably, or I'll go out with my brother on our beach vacation and do it once a year, right? Like a very responsible way to do it. And so now, I guess maybe because I'm removed from the pressure of school, like, it's a very easy thing for me to say, but talking about some of the hard things that make us who we are earlier, it's almost like alcohol, substance, that's all part of like the college experience, and you have to learn the hard way. But I don't know if that's really true either. So
that just frosts my Fruit Loops.
What'd you say?
Like, you shouldn't have to. That's why taking a step back and figuring out what you really want instead of what your culture is pushing you to do or your pain is pushing you to do. And you should know, Joel, you're actually more normal than not. Like, you're not a freak of the universe because you decided that you wanted something more than drinking. There's a lot of people who are, I don't know if you've seen Sunday Morning, it's an Australian website. There are a lot of people who are re-embracing, they call it sober curious. They're sober curious. Like, is this a better life? It's a wellness upgrade to get rid of alcohol. But here's the way I always think of conversations. If you tell people what they should do, what do they have left to say? The conversation should be pulling, so what are the good things about alcohol? What does it do for you? What does it help you deal with? What do you like? Then what's the not so good things? And now it all comes out of their mouths, and people really believe what comes out of their mouth, not what comes out of my mouth. And you got to really like and respect people. We are so interesting. Like, people know whether you're bullshitting them or you're really interested in who they are. So I think that what works in the prison, I think that's what works with Rams in Recovery. I think that works with everybody. Are you sincerely interested in what they want? And then you offer the information about the practical stuff. But anyway, yeah. It's crazy. Our culture's crazy.
Yeah. There's two things on that. Number one is I deal with this a lot. I work one-on-one with people as like a personal trainer, and I find that the most successful clients that I have, due to consistency of them showing up, are the people that I just get along with better, because it turns very much into like that. A relationship with a personal trainer is obviously, when you come to me, I'm going to give you an exercise program that works. Like, that's pretty inherent in that relationship, but it doesn't work unless me and the client get to know each other, and I know about their family and what's going on. And it's among those conversations of, what are you doing this weekend, or what are you having for dinner tonight, that we learn how to squat and how to deadlift and how to, appropriately arrange these things together so that you can do it in a safe and effective way. And so I think that you're onto something there, just getting to know people. And like you said, people are very interesting. Uh, don't expect the worst from somebody, or don't just like push people away because, I like to be alone or whatever it is. But getting out of your comfort zone and having a conversation with somebody about something that you wouldn't otherwise, number one, is good for you, but it gives you an opportunity to help them with the things that you know. The other thing that you mentioned there was was it sober curious is what you used? This is something that I guess I'm just in this world, but online, it seems to me, and I'm probably just in the echo chamber of the social media algorithm, which it seems like you have done a good job of removing yourself from. But yeah, there's a ton of people that are pushing this, like, get up at 5 a.m., no alcohol, exercise twice a day. It seems very problematic to me. It's like the opposite side of the coin, where we're going from one extreme to the other. And I think one of the main benefits of having these conversations is that dialogue of the moderate, that it sounds like the majority of people are already doing anyways, is actually the place where we want to get people. And a couple of drinks or whatever it is that you're engaging in, under moderation, as long as it's something that you actually want to do for yourself, is okay.
Yeah, and I think it's that, how I talked about that middle part of your brain. If you get obsessive about your exercise, or obsessive about your diet, or obsessive about anything, that's unhealthy in the long run. It has to be more compassionate to yourself. Compassion is something we all struggle with, but it has to be more compassionate. It has to be sustainable, and you need support systems. So, and that's why with the alcohol, like, I did prevention work at VCU for 30 years. It wasn't until I had students in recovery go out with me to the classrooms that I would actually have people come back with me to talk. And sometimes they'd be drunk or high. But if there was a person in recovery, they knew I was, like, seriously not going to judge them, because I'm embracing this person who's, in recovery. So I think along the prevention spectrum, anytime you feel judgment, that's going to shut it down. It has to be non-judgmental. People are not stupid. They do things for a reason. And if you don't understand what they're doing, you just don't understand enough why they're doing what they're doing. It's serving a purpose. And they may not know what the purpose is. And that's why a nice back and forth, non-judgmental, compassionate curiosity will help people unlock those things and be open to some new things.
Have you heard of internal family systems?
Yes.
Okay, I was going to say, just in line with what you're saying, it reminded me of that. I've spoken to somebody about IFS on here before, and I don't know how hokey or real you think it is, but I think that's like a very controversial thing. I talked to the practitioner about it, but that's been a great helpful model for me in that regard, of the words you're using: kindness, compassion. It's very in line with that. Individuals that are self-led, to use IFS technology or terminology, are able to meet others with those things, with compassion and kindness and courage and confidence. And if you are self-led and you are meeting somebody, you're creating that non-judgmental space for somebody to open up and share with you. And I think that's very in line with what we're talking about, and super important. The reason why it's important to be a good person is because you allow other people that space to share things and heal from the stuff that they've been through, and hopefully have better health outcomes in the end?
I think a lot of it is like vocabulary words. You know how you don't know a word and you learn the definition and then you hear it all the time, but you never heard it ever before in your life, and now this word is everywhere? Well, IFS is kind of like that. If you didn't know, it's hard to understand ourselves. And if you don't have somebody help you in that non-judgmental, self-compassionate space, you're not going to be able to discern some of those things that you need. So it places it in a framework. It gives you the vocabulary to understand yourself in a better way and deal with your ambivalence. So I think, I don't know, Joel, I think one of the most useful analogies in my clinical career, and you can steal it because I stole it from somebody else, is everything in life is like shoes. You know how you try on shoes and some fit and some don't, but you don't give up wearing shoes? Everything in life is like shoes. You go to a personal trainer, you didn't click, there's other personal trainers. You try a therapy, it doesn't work, try another one. You try a recovery group, that one doesn't work, you go to another one, because we're all different. But you just don't give up. Keep trying on shoes.
I like that a lot because, I hear that with, I'm a CrossFit trainer, and CrossFit is one of like thousands of ways to actually improve your fitness and get in shape. And so it's like, if you didn't enjoy it when you tried it out, just go join the next gym doing the next methodology down the street. And then you'll eventually do one that works. And then you'll be like, this is it, this works. And you'll try to sell it to everybody and make everybody else do it. But you're right. A thing that I say often is everything all together, all at once. And life is like that, where every single thing is important. Like, to bring up the example we used earlier of individual versus group, like neither one of those is more important than the other. They're both important, and the need to improve them is both true at the same time, all at once. There's thousands of variables in life that go into wellness, and all of them are equally important. And to use that example earlier, I find a lot of times when I talk to people, I just am trying to figure out the language to use to explain what I mean. And that seems to be one of the biggest challenges of educating people, is like English feels incomplete. Like I have this feeling that I'm trying to explain and I just can't quite get it out. And I think exploring that is very much a part of well-being, just the same as everything else.
Yeah, and I think if you lead with that, there's no one right way to do something. My brother always says there's 6 right ways to do anything. There is no one right way. And that's very spiritual, what you just said. It's not either or. We build these containers that are false dichotomies. It's always both and. It's like, be open to it all and see what works for you, because you're a different individual than someone else. And I think if we give people the space to think about their drinking. Like I never told young people what to do. I just encouraged them to ask more questions, like, what do you really want? And how is that meeting what you need? And that's what people need.
I was going to say, what I appreciate about this conversation specifically is I feel like at times when I discuss things with non-researchers, it gets very in the weeds as far as like, the validity of some of the things that we're talking about. And that's not to discount anybody's lived experience, because I think that is equally and perhaps at times more important than anything research could tell you. But it is nice to discuss a conversation with somebody who does have the facts and the research and the knowledge in their head to pull from. But you are a good bridge between the real world and the world of research and statistics and application of those things. And I think that is, I need to have more conversations with people that are like you, because I think that these are they end up being the most productive.
So thank you. I think of myself as a translational scientist, trying to translate what we know into things that actually apply to people's lives in a way they can grasp them. I'll give you another research crush, Dr. Judson Brewer. If you go to drjudd.com, he has he's really great. So check out drjudd.com. He talks about the brain and it's a habit loop, trigger, behavior, reward, and how you can step out of it. But it's all curiosity and kindness. Those are the things that will change our lives, curiosity and kindness. So much more fun, and it never builds tolerance. Drugs, they're almost good enough to medicate pain, but curiosity and kindness trump them.
Yeah.
I have lots of friends in recovery. They're like, it was almost good enough till it destroyed my life, but it was almost good enough. I just want to congratulate you. I do appreciate the topic of good people and what that means. And so having these conversations helps me think about things, and I think it helps other people think about what it means to be a good person. So what have you decided it means to be a good person?
Oh man, I'm actually going to ask you this question next, but I've talked to tons of people about it, and I've asked that exact question, and I feel like the more that I ask it, the less I know. And I'll use the words of somebody who I'm friends with. He's been on the show a couple times. His name's Ethan, but I don't necessarily know what it means to be a good person, but I know what it's not, right? And I think that the better question to ask is what I'm doing good, or is this thing that I'm thinking about to bring it back up to what you said earlier about having space, right? If you create your life in such a way that you have regular space to think, whether it's meditation or going for a run or whatever, you essentially have the opportunity to ask that question of yourself, like, is what I'm doing, is what I have been doing good? And I think that the answer is usually pretty intuitive and obvious to people. And a good example of this would be, say somebody looks at me in the show and says, man, this podcast that you're doing is great. But behind the scenes, and I don't do this, but behind the scenes, I don't research my guests, and I'm really lazy with the amount of people that I reach out to. And so, like, from an outside perspective, they think that I am doing good, but I know intuitively that I'm not doing my best. And I think that relationship always exists. You yourself know if you're doing a good job, and it's based off of everything all together all at once. Like, what are your values? Are you living up to them regularly? Are you engaging in regular conversation and pursuing meaningful relationships with other people? Do you have a community? It's all of those things. And I think they contribute to goodness in a way that is very hard to nail down, but everybody knows if they're doing good. From an outside perspective, you can never tell based off of anything anybody's doing, but they themselves know if they are a good person or are doing good.
Have you heard of the Enneagram? It's a 9-sided diagram. Yep. Because it's hard to see your own shadow, like you can't see your own stuff. So I do have groups of women that I hang out with, and we work on our Enneagram type. And Dan Siegel's next book is going to be for professionals, but there's now data to support it's the way the brain works. Like, there are 9 different types and 3 subtypes in each type. And it seems to be a biological thing, and it's incredibly useful because it opens your eyes. For me, I'm an old person. It's so much better to be at the end than the beginning. Did you know old people are happier than young people just because you guys could do anything? And it's so stressful being able to do anything. Me, there's only so much I'm going to do. And I'm looking at it, sort of in the rearview mirror. So here's what I've learned. The question is, and this goes way back to, I don't know if it's Plato or Aristotle, is the question to live the good life or to do the good life? Like, to do good or, have fun. And I think the answer is both. Like, we need to be able to savor the good and to enjoy stuff for ourselves and to have friends and activities. We are supposed to take just because it's the right thing to do.
Well, I think that's a great answer and a wonderful place to end the show. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode of Good People. If you enjoyed my conversation with Linda as much as I did, check the show notes to go to her website, Linda Gives Back, and you can find a little bit more from her in the information that she puts out. Before you head out, if you guys are watching on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our weekly uploads. Any interaction with the show really does help us out a ton, and we appreciate you very much for doing so. If while you were listening, you thought of somebody who would like this episode, please share it with them. Share it with someone you love, perhaps your grandma. We'll see you next time.